Imagine waking up tomorrow with a fever. Your head pounds, every muscle aches, and even getting out of bed feels like a challenge. You'd probably reach for a bottle of ibuprofen without thinking twice. If the fever climbed high enough, you'd call your doctor. Within hours, you'd have medicine, advice, and a reasonable expectation that you'll be back to normal in a few days. Now, erase all of that. No pills, no hospitals, no antibiotics, no understanding of bacteria or viruses, not even the faintest idea that invisible organisms are invading your body. Instead, you're standing in a small camp somewhere in Ice Age Europe 50,000 years ago. The nearest person who might know how to help is an elder whose medical training consists of a lifetime of observation, a remarkable memory for useful plants, and generations of knowledge passed down around countless campfires. If they're wrong, there isn't a second opinion waiting just down the road. And yet, somehow, your story doesn't end there. The people we call ancient humans didn't survive one disease, or one epidemic, or one harsh season. They endured hundreds of thousands of years surrounded by parasites, infected wounds, dangerous animals, contaminated food, mysterious fevers, and illnesses they could neither see nor explain. They crossed deserts, forests, frozen tundra, and tropical jungles, each filled with its own invisible biological threats. Against all odds, they survived long enough to become every person alive today. So how did they do it? How did our ancestors fight disease when medicine, as we understand it, didn't exist? When the sharpest surgical instrument was a stone blade, and the greatest medical mystery wasn't how to cure an infection, but why some people recovered while others never woke up again. The answer is far more sophisticated than it first appears. This isn't a story about miracle cures or unbelievable luck. It's a story of evolution, behavior, observation, cooperation, and a human body that had been quietly preparing for this battle over millions of years. Yet before we can understand how ancient humans treated illness, we need to rethink one of the biggest assumptions about the world they lived in. The diseases they faced were nothing like the ones most people imagine. Many people picture prehistoric life as an endless parade of deadly epidemics, imagining filthy camps where disease spread unchecked and even the smallest infection became a death sentence. But the archaeological evidence tells a remarkably different story. Life was undeniably dangerous, yet the greatest biological threats confronting hunter-gatherers were not the same infectious diseases that would later sweep through crowded cities and devastate entire civilizations. The reason comes down to something remarkably simple: population size. Imagine trying to start a forest fire with only a handful of trees. The flames might spread for a moment, but before long they would run out of fuel. Many infectious diseases work in exactly the same way. Viruses and bacteria that rely on rapid person-to-person transmission need a constant supply of new hosts. Without enough people living close together, the chain of infection quickly breaks. For most of human history, that wasn't a problem ancient people created. Hunter-gatherers typically lived in small, mobile bands of perhaps a few dozen individuals. They moved with the seasons, followed migrating animals, and rarely stayed in one place long enough for contagious diseases to establish themselves. A virus might infect everyone in the group, but once those individuals either recovered or died, there was simply nowhere else for it to go. This is why many of history's most infamous diseases, smallpox, measles, cholera, and even the Great Plague pandemics, were largely absent from the Paleolithic world. These pathogens evolved to exploit crowded settlements, permanent villages, and eventually cities where thousands of people shared water, food, and living space. In many ways, civilization created the perfect environment for them. Ancient hunter-gatherers, without realizing it, denied these diseases the one thing they needed most: an endless stream of susceptible hosts. That didn't mean prehistoric life was healthy or easy. The dangers were simply different. Deep cuts could become infected after a hunt. Parasites lurked in food and water. Smoke-filled shelters irritated lungs. Contaminated meat could trigger severe intestinal illness, while bacteria, fungi, and tuberculosis silently circulated through human populations long before written history began. Even a broken tooth could become a life-threatening infection. So the real challenge wasn't surviving spectacular pandemics that wiped out entire continents. Instead, It was enduring a relentless series of everyday biological assaults. Ancient humans weren't fighting one great enemy, they were constantly negotiating with an invisible world of microbes that surrounded them every day. Their greatest defense wasn't medicine at all, but the habits and behaviors that kept many of those threats from gaining a foothold in the first place. What makes this especially remarkable is that these protective behaviors emerged long before anyone understood what bacteria or viruses were. Evolution had already equipped humans with something astonishingly effective: instincts that quietly reduced the risk of infection before it could begin. Modern scientists sometimes refer to this as behavioral immunity, a collection of automatic behaviors that help prevent pathogens from ever entering the body. In many ways, it serves as the immune system's first line of defense, intervening before a single white blood cell has to fight. You experience it constantly, even if you've never noticed. The smell of spoiled meat makes your stomach turn before you've taken a bite. Mold growing on forgotten leftovers immediately feels wrong. A festering wound, stagnant water, or the sight of human waste naturally triggers disgust. These reactions aren't simply cultural habits that your parents taught you. Studies suggest that even very young infants display avoidance responses toward potential sources of contamination long before they understand what disease is. Somewhere deep inside your brain, ancient survival programs are continuously scanning the environment for danger. For prehistoric humans, these instincts weren't minor conveniences. They could mean the difference between life and death. Choosing cleaner water over murky pools, avoiding obviously rotten food, steering clear of people who appeared gravely ill, or treating decomposing bodies with caution all reduced opportunities for pathogens to spread. No one needed to understand microbes for these behaviors to work. Natural selection favored individuals whose instincts kept them healthier, and over countless generations, those instincts became woven into human behavior itself. Their nomadic lifestyle strengthened this invisible defense. Unlike later farming communities, hunter-gatherers rarely remained in one camp long enough for waste to accumulate. Every move to a new location effectively reset their sanitation. Human waste, food scraps, and contaminated water were left behind before they could become persistent sources of infection. It was an elegant solution achieved not through engineering, but through mobility. Then there was fire, perhaps the most transformative discovery in human history. Beyond providing warmth and protection, cooking dramatically reduced the parasites and bacteria hiding inside meat and many plants. Heat destroyed countless pathogens that would otherwise have entered the body. At the same time, cooked food became easier to digest, allowing humans to extract more energy from every meal. Some anthropologists even argue that mastering fire helped reshape the human body itself, supporting larger brains by making food both safer and more nutritious. Without realizing it, our ancestors had assembled an impressive system of disease prevention. Their daily routines, instincts, and simple technologies worked together to keep countless infections from ever taking hold. Yet no system could be perfect. No matter how careful they were, some pathogens inevitably slipped through those first lines of defense. And when prevention failed, the struggle entered an entirely different arena, one hidden inside the human body, where one of evolution's greatest masterpieces was already waiting. Once an infection breached every external defense, ancient humans had no choice but to rely on a weapon they could neither see nor fully understand. It wasn't crafted from stone or carved from wood, nor could it be passed from one generation to the next like a hunting technique. Instead, it was woven into every cell of their bodies: the immune system. It's easy to take this remarkable piece of biology for granted because it works silently, without asking for your attention. Right now, as you watch this video, millions of immune cells are patrolling your bloodstream, inspecting tissues, identifying suspicious molecules, and eliminating threats before you're even aware they exist. It's one of the most sophisticated biological systems ever produced by evolution. Consider what it's actually capable of. Your immune system can recognize an astonishing variety of foreign invaders, distinguish them from your own healthy cells, and coordinate a response involving specialized cells that each perform different tasks. Some launch immediate attacks against anything unfamiliar, others gather information, almost like scouts on a battlefield. Certain cells manufacture antibodies designed to lock onto a specific pathogen, while memory cells quietly store that encounter away, sometimes for decades, so that if the same invader returns, the response is faster and far more effective. For ancient humans, this invisible army was doing exactly what it does for us today. The difference was the environment in which it had evolved. From infancy, they encountered an extraordinary diversity of microbes, parasites, and environmental challenges. Every successful battle strengthened their immune memory, while every generation was shaped by a process far harsher than anything modern medicine allows. Evolution doesn't reward effort, it rewards survival. Individuals whose immune systems happened to respond more effectively to local diseases were simply more likely to live long enough to have children. Those beneficial genetic variations became increasingly common over thousands of generations, gradually producing populations well adapted to the pathogens in their own environments. In a very real sense, every surviving community carried the biological record of countless previous epidemics within its DNA. History offers a powerful reminder of how specific that protection really was. When Europeans reached the Americas, they unknowingly carried diseases such as smallpox, measles, and influenza into populations that had never encountered them before. Indigenous peoples possessed immune systems every bit as sophisticated as those of the newcomers, but they had evolved under an entirely different disease landscape. The result was one of the greatest demographic catastrophes in human history, with entire societies devastated by infections against which they had no inherited experience. That tragedy reveals an important truth about our ancestors. Their resilience wasn't the product of invincibility, nor was it simply a matter of luck. It was the result of millions of years of evolution shaping humans to meet the challenges they actually faced. But evolution could only carry them so far. When illness lingered, injuries became infected, or pain grew unbearable, survival increasingly depended on something biology alone could not provide: knowledge. And that knowledge came not from laboratories, but from careful observation of the natural world. For our ancestors, medicine wasn't something purchased at a pharmacy. It was something discovered through careful observation of the natural world. Ancient humans couldn't peer through microscopes or analyze chemical structures, yet they possessed something just as valuable for survival: generations of accumulated experience. If a certain leaf eased pain, people remembered it. If a root made wounds worse, they avoided it. If someone became violently ill after eating a particular berry, that lesson was unlikely to be forgotten. What makes this remarkable is that plants are far from passive organisms. Unable to run from predators or escape harmful microbes, they evolved another strategy over hundreds of millions of years: chemistry. Many plants manufacture compounds that repel insects, fight fungi, discourage animals from eating them, or inhibit bacterial growth. Long before humans existed, forests had become vast laboratories of natural pharmaceuticals. Our ancestors learned to tap into that chemical arsenal through countless experiments, most of which were undoubtedly risky. Every successful remedy probably came after many failed attempts, and some discoveries almost certainly cost lives. Yet over thousands of years, a practical knowledge accumulated. The result wasn't medicine based on scientific theory, but medicine based on experience. If something consistently helped people recover, it earned a place in the community's memory. What's particularly fascinating is that this wasn't unique to our own species. Evidence from ancient dental plaque has revealed traces of medicinal plants in Neanderthal remains that are difficult to explain as ordinary food. One individual discovered in El Sidrón cave in Spain appears to have consumed plants such as yarrow and poplar, both known today for their anti-inflammatory or pain-relieving properties. That same individual suffered from a painful dental abscess, leading researchers to suggest something extraordinary. A Neanderthal may have been deliberately treating a toothache with medicinal plants. Think about what that implies. Around 50,000 years ago, another human species may have recognized that certain plants produced predictable effects inside the body. They didn't know about active compounds or inflammation, but they understood cause and effect. Eat this, and the pain eases. Use that, and a wound heals more cleanly. That's not superstition. It's the beginning of pharmacology. Modern medicine continues to validate many of those ancient discoveries. Aspirin traces its origins to willow bark. Quinine, once the most effective treatment for malaria, comes from the bark of the cinchona tree. Numerous modern drugs either come directly from natural compounds or were inspired by them. Even today, researchers frequently investigate traditional medicinal plants because centuries of observation often point toward chemicals with genuine biological effects. Ancient healers worked without laboratories, clinical trials, or any understanding of microbes. Yet, through patience, memory, and relentless trial and error, they uncovered remedies that science is still exploring today. Even so, the story of healing didn't end with the plants they gathered or the medicines they prepared. Some of the most powerful forms of care our ancestors ever relied upon couldn't be picked from the forest at all. They came from the people standing beside them. After all, illness has never been solely an individual experience. Survival often depended not only on the body's ability to heal or on the remedies available, but also on the willingness of others to help. Even today, one of the first things we do when we're sick is ask someone for assistance. We want a family member to bring us water, a friend to check in, or a doctor to reassure us that we're going to recover. That impulse isn't a modern luxury. It is an ancient survival strategy, one that reaches back to the earliest human communities. Hunter-gatherers depended on one another for almost everything. Food was shared, children were cared for collectively, and survival itself relied on cooperation. That same social network became an invisible form of medicine whenever someone fell ill. A person weakened by fever couldn't hunt, gather food, or defend themselves effectively. Without assistance, even a relatively minor illness could become fatal through dehydration, exhaustion, or starvation, rather than the disease itself. Archaeology offers intriguing clues that ancient humans often cared for individuals who could not have survived alone. Some prehistoric skeletons show severe injuries or disabilities that had healed over many years, indicating that these individuals were fed, protected, and supported by others long after they had become unable to contribute fully to the group. In other words, compassion wasn't simply a moral virtue. It was part of humanity's evolutionary strategy. Modern science is revealing just how powerful that strategy really is. People with strong social connections consistently recover better from illness than those who are isolated. Chronic loneliness is associated with higher levels of stress hormones, increased inflammation, weaker immune responses, and a greater risk of premature death. Supportive relationships, on the other hand, can reduce stress, improve immune function, and even lessen the perception of pain. The body responds differently when it believes it is safe. This may also explain why healing rituals became nearly universal across ancient cultures. Whether led by a respected elder or a community healer, these ceremonies offered more than symbolic comfort. They surrounded the sick with attention, reassurance, and the expectation of recovery. Today, we recognize that belief itself can trigger measurable biological changes through the placebo effect, influencing pain, stress, and even aspects of immune function. The ritual didn't have to cure the disease directly to help the body fight it more effectively. Together, practical care, emotional support, and shared belief formed a powerful partnership. Long before hospitals existed, one of humanity's greatest medical resources was the simple fact that our ancestors rarely faced illness alone. For countless generations, that combination of biology, knowledge, and cooperation helped small human communities weather many of the health challenges they encountered. But those strategies had evolved for a world of small, mobile bands, not permanent settlements. Then, beginning roughly 12,000 years ago, everything changed. People started planting crops instead of following wild herds. Villages became permanent. Populations grew. Animals that had once lived at a distance were suddenly sleeping just outside or even inside the home. It was the beginning of civilization, but it also marked the beginning of humanity's greatest public health crisis. The archaeological record reveals just how dramatic that transition was. Skeletons from some of the earliest farming societies tell a surprisingly grim story. Average height declined, suggesting poorer overall nutrition. Tooth decay became far more common as diets shifted toward carbohydrate-rich grains. Bones began showing signs of vitamin deficiencies and chronic illness that were much rarer among earlier hunter-gatherers. Although agriculture produced more food, it often produced a less varied and less nutritious diet. Even more significant was what happened to disease itself. Permanent settlements allowed waste to accumulate, contaminating water supplies, and attracting insects and rodents that carried new pathogens. Crowded living conditions meant infections could spread from one household to the next without ever running out of new hosts. For the first time in human history, diseases could circulate continuously through large populations instead of burning out after infecting a small group. Living alongside domesticated animals made the situation even more dangerous. Many of history's most notorious infectious diseases are believed to have originated in animals before adapting to humans. Viruses and bacteria that once infected cattle, pigs, or birds suddenly had endless opportunities to evolve inside their new human hosts. Trade routes then carried these pathogens across continents, transforming local outbreaks into devastating epidemics. It's one of history's greatest ironies. The same agricultural revolution that eventually gave rise to cities, writing, science, and modern medicine also created the conditions that made medicine desperately necessary. Humanity gained stability, larger populations, and the foundations of civilization, but it paid for those achievements with an entirely new disease landscape, unlike anything our hunter-gatherer ancestors had ever experienced. Seen from that perspective, one truth becomes remarkably clear. Prehistoric humans weren't protected because they possessed better technology. In many respects, they were protected because of how they lived. The path toward civilization brought extraordinary progress, but it also unleashed biological challenges that our species is still learning to manage today. Even more remarkable is that they achieved this without ever knowing what they were fighting. They never discovered germ theory. They never saw a bacterium through a microscope or understood how viruses spread from one person to another. By every modern standard, they were working in the dark. And yet, generation after generation, they found ways to survive in a world where illness was an ever-present companion. They survived not because they understood disease, but because evolution and experience had quietly prepared them for it. Their bodies, their accumulated knowledge, and their communities worked together to overcome challenges they could neither see nor explain. None of this should romanticize prehistoric life. A deep wound could still become fatal. A simple infection might claim the life of an otherwise healthy person. Childbirth was dangerous, childhood mortality was high, and countless people died from diseases that modern medicine can now cure with astonishing ease. Vaccines, antibiotics, surgery, and sanitation remain among humanity's greatest achievements, and billions of lives have been saved because of them. But understanding how our ancestors faced disease reminds us that medicine didn't begin in a laboratory. It began with observation, with cooperation, with curiosity, with people doing everything they could to keep one another alive using only the knowledge they had. Every antibiotic we take, every vaccine we receive, and every medical breakthrough we celebrate stands on the shoulders of an unimaginably long history of human adaptation. Long before we learned how to defeat disease, we learned how to endure it. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson our ancestors left behind, that humanity's greatest survival tool has never been strength alone, but our extraordinary ability to learn, adapt, and pass that knowledge to the generations that follow.